August 1942, the dense, humid jungles of Guadalcanal. The air was thick with the scent of rot and tropical foliage, mingling with the acrid tang of cordite and sweat. Japanese soldiers, weary from relentless campaigns across Southeast Asia, trudged along narrow, mud-choked trails under the oppressive canopy, expecting the familiar brutality of combat, executions, ambushes, and the ever-present fear of sudden death. Yet what awaited them was a scene that defied every assumption, every ingrained lesson of war. American troops, fatigued yet organized, moved with deliberate precision, offering captured soldiers clean water, rations, and blankets, tending to wounds with medical supplies captured from field hospitals. Accounts from the 164th Infantry Regiment emphasize the wide-eyed shock of these captives, a disbelief etched into their faces that one diarist described as, "They looked at us as if the world had turned upside down." Conditioned by years of bushido and indoctrination to expect cruelty, the Japanese could scarcely reconcile this systematic kindness with the horrors of war they had known. The Americans, meanwhile, operated under strict adherence to the Geneva Conventions. Despite the intensity of jungle fighting, field medics, armed with standard-issue M3 submachine guns and rifles, documented each prisoner's condition, treated injuries ranging from shrapnel wounds to tropical infections, and even arranged letters to families through Red Cross channels. In the eyes of the Axis soldiers, the contrast was surreal. Some whispered that they had been conditioned to die rather than surrender, and yet here were their enemies providing care, not punishment. Reports suggest that this unusual treatment sowed confusion and a subtle psychological paralysis among Japanese units, disrupting established assumptions about Allied conduct. By late August, small skirmishes across Henderson Field only heightened the tension. American engineers and infantrymen, reinforced by elements of the 1st Marine Division, secured strategic points while continuing to treat prisoners humanely. Unit logs from both sides reveal repeated mentions of astonishment. Japanese captives hesitated to resist, unsure if this was a trap, while American commanders observed that morale among their own troops often improved when acts of discipline and humane treatment were upheld consistently. Equipment captured during these encounters included Type 95 rifles, Type 99 light machine guns, and limited quantities of artillery shells, yet the Americans carefully logged, segregated, and returned items where feasible rather than destroying. Indiscriminately, a policy that further deepened Axis bewilderment. Into September, the pattern continued across successive engagements. The 1st Battalion of the 164th Infantry recorded dozens of Japanese prisoners being treated with both medical attention and respect, while field diaries noted that enemy soldiers occasionally expressed tentative gratitude, gestures almost unthinkable amid the savagery of the Pacific theater. Analysts later remarked that these actions had strategic consequences. The humane approach fostered a subtle but tangible shift in local engagements, slowing fanatic resistance in certain sectors and enabling more rapid consolidation of territory with fewer casualties. The psychological impact on Axis troops, conditioned to anticipate only cruelty, cannot be overstated. Even as the Americans advanced, the prisoners' stunned compliance underscored the radical divergence between expectation and reality on the battlefield. The Guadalcanal experience serves as a microcosm of broader operational principles that American forces would carry forward. Logistics, discipline, and adherence to ethical treatment were not abstract ideals, but operational tools, producing real effects in morale, combat efficiency, and the perception of U.S. forces by both enemy and ally. The astonishment of Japanese soldiers, the shock of encountering humane, methodical treatment amid the chaos of war, foreshadows similar episodes across later campaigns in New Guinea, the Philippines, and beyond. This consistency in conduct not only shaped immediate tactical outcomes, but also laid the foundation for a long-term reputation that distinguished American forces in the eyes of both the Axis and the liberated populations. As the narrative moves from Guadalcanal, it sets the stage to examine the complex interplay of planning, supply, and leadership that allowed these unprecedented acts of battlefield humanity to take root and endure. By early 1941, the Pacific War had erupted into a relentless clash between Imperial Japan and the combined might of Allied forces. Across sun-scorched islands and dense jungles, Japanese soldiers were molded by a military doctrine that glorified death in combat and demanded unwavering loyalty. Surrender was not only dishonorable, it was unthinkable. Captured soldiers recalled the pervasive fear of Allied brutality, expectations reinforced by wartime propaganda, whispered tales from returning units, and memories of atrocities such as the Bataan Death March in April 1942, which left an indelible mark on the Japanese psyche. The sound of boots on gravel or the distant rumble of artillery was enough to revive the anticipation of immediate execution, yet the reality they would encounter under American hands would be profoundly disorienting. Reports from early campaigns in the Philippines, Malaya, and Wake Island reveal a repeated pattern. Japanese troops trained to resist capture at all costs often surrendered reluctantly, their eyes scanning for the lethal reprisals they were conditioned to expect. And yet when they entered the control of U.S. forces, the landscape of war shifted in ways both subtle and startling. Units such as the 1st Marine Division and the 25th Infantry Division, informed by meticulous study of European conflicts and international military law, had implemented comprehensive procedures for prisoner handling. Captives were met with orderly processing lines, careful registration, and calm methodical triage by medics equipped with field kits, bandages, and morphine syrettes. The aroma of hot meals, the quiet efficiency of guards, and the clean stretchers of makeshift infirmaries created a stark contrast with the expectations forged by fear and indoctrination. Cultural dissonance amplified the effect. Japanese soldiers steeped in Bushido and years of martial tradition confronted a moral framework entirely alien to their own. Where propaganda had promised cruelty and vengeance, they instead encountered civility, rationed food, and meticulous care. Some observers noted that prisoners initially hesitated, unsure if these gestures were a prelude to deception or punishment, before slowly realizing the consistency of their treatment. Logs from the 25th Infantry Division describe Japanese captives' wide-eyed confusion, and in certain cases quiet expressions of relief or tentative compliance, a testament to the psychological weight of ethical adherence on the battlefield. Beyond morality, humane treatment carried strategic significance. Officers understood that providing medical care, regular meals, and safe containment could yield actionable intelligence, foster compliance, and stabilize contested areas with minimal force. Secure detention facilities, often located just behind front lines, allowed commanders to process prisoners efficiently without disrupting ongoing operations. Medics, armed with standard-issue M1 Garands and Springfield rifles for self-defense, carried out their duties alongside combat troops, embodying the fusion of ethical responsibility and tactical calculation. By upholding these standards, American forces demonstrated a consistency that unsettled Japanese units accustomed to expecting only the harshest outcomes upon surrender. The early campaigns of 1941 and 1942 thus set the psychological stage for a recurring pattern, the stark dissonance between indoctrinated fear and observed reality. As Japanese soldiers reconciled their expectations with the deliberate, humane procedures of their captors, a subtle yet profound shift occurred, influencing morale, surrender behavior, and subsequent tactical decisions. This foundation, rooted in doctrine, ethics, and cultural confrontation, paved the way for the logistical and technical innovations that allowed U.S. forces to maintain these standards consistently across increasingly complex combat environments. Understanding this interplay of strategy and ethics provides essential context for the subsequent exploration of how American ingenuity transformed the challenge of humane prisoner handling into a repeatable, operationally effective practice. By late 1942, the machinery behind effective POW treatment in the Pacific had become a battlefield instrument, as precise as any artillery piece or tank. The U.S. Army had established specialized detention units, carefully engineered to process, care for, and house prisoners under combat conditions. Quonset-style shelters, prefabricated and capable of accommodating dozens of captives, dotted makeshift encampments behind forward lines, their corrugated steel walls echoing with the subdued murmurs of wary prisoners. Portable medical kits traveled with patrols and forward detachments, stocked with sulfur drugs, morphine, and surgical instruments, ensuring that even in remote jungle clearings, wounded POWs could be treated within hours rather than days. Field hospitals, designed for rapid throughput, processed 50 to 70 injured captives per day, combining speed with meticulous attention to hygiene, a stark contrast to the brutal improvisation Japanese soldiers expected from enemy forces. Food distribution followed a similarly rigorous approach. Caloric intake was carefully calculated, with each POW receiving 2,500 calories daily to prevent malnutrition and disease. Mess officers and medical staff worked in tandem, recording rations against individual health assessments, while barracks assignments were organized according to both medical needs and security considerations. Every incoming prisoner underwent an intake assessment. Personal details were documented, wounds evaluated, and psychological state noted. Training manuals emphasized the dual value of these procedures, operational efficiency, and the subtle psychological benefits of humane treatment. Well-fed, medically tended, and consistently treated prisoners were more likely to cooperate with interrogators, comply with camp rules, and maintain morale, creating a controlled environment that minimized unrest while maximizing intelligence-gathering opportunities. For Japanese soldiers, accustomed to surrender being synonymous with immediate execution or torture, these processes were almost incomprehensible. The orderly lines, the calm efficiency of guards, and the systematic recording of personal details were interpreted as either ruses or signs of weakness. Diaries and post-campaign interrogations repeatedly note the confusion and disbelief of Japanese captives, whose expectations of cruelty were subverted by structured kindness. Communication protocols further deepened this sense of disorientation. Prisoners were permitted to send letters home within weeks, re-establishing connections with family members in ways almost unimaginable under the doctrines of the Imperial Japanese Army. These tangible gestures of civility, juxtaposed against a backdrop of lethal combat, created a psychological echo that lingered long after individual encounters. Beyond supplies and shelter, the system's effectiveness relied on meticulous organization and foresight. Officers coordinated transport, medical logistics, and camp security with the precision of an engineering corps, ensuring that humane treatment was not an abstract principle but a repeatable operational standard. Even in the chaos of active engagements, the framework allowed American forces to integrate POW care seamlessly into ongoing campaigns, turning what might have been a vulnerability into a strategic asset. The innovations of late 1942, from portable medical kits to Quonset-style barracks and standardized rations, laid the foundation for real-world tests on the battlefield, where abstract principles of kindness, discipline, and efficiency would meet the unpredictable realities of combat in the Pacific Theater. November 1942, Guadalcanal's Henderson Field. The air was heavy with smoke, gunpowder, and the acrid tang of burning fuel as artillery shells tore through the surrounding jungle. Rain-soaked soil churned beneath booted feet, while the shriek of Japanese Type 99 rifles and the staccato bursts of American Browning M1919 machine guns filled the chaos of battle. Amid the smoke and mud, elements of the 164th Infantry Regiment and the 1st Marine Division succeeded in capturing over 80 Japanese soldiers in a single harrowing engagement. For the prisoners, indoctrinated to expect execution or torture, the scene was almost incomprehensible. Instead of immediate violence, they encountered methodical, calm procedures designed to safeguard their lives. Wounded men were immediately attended to by stretcher teams, receiving field dressings, sulfur treatments, and morphine where needed, before being evacuated to makeshift infirmaries behind the front lines. Hot meals followed swiftly, the aroma of rice meat and broth carrying an unfamiliar reassurance through the haze of battle. Interrogation logs and after-action reports capture the astonishment of the Japanese captives. Many described their American captors as not like the stories told back home, remarking on both the deliberate calm of soldiers who had just faced them in combat and the meticulous organization of their temporary camp. Daily routines were enforced even amidst ongoing fighting. Roll calls were conducted with precision, hygiene checks carried out, and medical evaluations repeated at regular intervals. The discipline and predictability of these actions contrasted starkly with the surrounding chaos, a cognitive shock that left prisoners struggling to reconcile fear with newfound security. For the American units, these procedures were more than adherence to regulations. They were a test of doctrine under extreme conditions, and the success of the system reinforced confidence in both leadership and troop discipline. The psychological impact extended beyond the immediate battlefield. Japanese soldiers, conditioned by years of propaganda and prior experiences such as Bataan, found themselves experiencing a profound dissonance. The men who had fought them with lethal force now treated them with order, care, and respect. Some initially suspected a trap, yet the consistent application of procedures, medical attention, structured shelter, and reliable sustenance gradually engendered compliance and quiet cooperation. Observers noted that even small gestures, such as allowing prisoners to write letters home or providing clean bedding, compounded the effect, creating a sense of unexpected stability within the turmoil of combat. These first battlefield implementations proved that the American system of humane POW treatment was operationally viable. Even under the stress of direct engagement, it bolstered the morale and discipline of U.S. troops, who saw their principles enacted successfully despite the surrounding violence, while also reshaping prisoner behavior through trust and predictability. The cognitive shock experienced by Japanese soldiers did not go unnoticed. Axis intelligence, analyzing reports from Guadalcanal, quickly took note of these deviations from expected Allied conduct. These early encounters would echo through subsequent campaigns, establishing a precedent that both unsettled the enemy and reinforced the strategic value of humane treatment. As the campaign moved forward, the lessons of Henderson Field would inform broader operational planning, demonstrating that meticulous systems of care could endure under the harshest conditions of Pacific warfare. Late 1942 through early 1943, reports began filtering back through Japanese intelligence channels and frontline officers, cataloging a pattern that defied every expectation of warfare. Reconnaissance summaries, captured field notes, and intercepted communications repeatedly referenced American conduct toward prisoners, emphasizing a level of care and organization that seemed almost alien. One memo noted with incredulity, "The Americans treat prisoners as if they were comrades, not enemies." Japanese and even German observers attempted to reconcile these accounts with entrenched doctrines of battlefield cruelty, scrutinizing the reports against their own expectations and Allied propaganda. The analysis often oscillated between disbelief and suspicion. Were these acts genuine or a sophisticated form of psychological manipulation? Some speculated tactical calculation, others suspected cultural naivete, yet the result was unanimous. Confusion spread through the ranks. Frontline officers recorded the immediate impact on morale. Troops trained under Bushido, conditioned to resist surrender and embrace death, began hesitating in combat, questioning the absolute inevitability of their fate should they fall into enemy hands. Minor skirmishes increasingly resulted in reluctant surrenders rather than fanatical last stands, a subtle yet tangible shift in battlefield behavior. Captured soldiers described methodical intake procedures, rapid medical triage, and secure yet non-oppressive detention arrangements, each detail chronicled in meticulous reports. From a Japanese perspective, the psychological dissonance was profound. Indoctrinated beliefs in Allied savagery collided with the reality of structured kindness, undermining expectations and, in turn, weakening operational resolve in certain engagements. Technical observations were catalogued alongside moral astonishment. Intelligence officers noted the precision of intake assessments, the organization of barracks, and the efficiency of medical processing, how injured prisoners were treated immediately, stabilized, and even allowed correspondence with families. The Axis noted that these processes did not diminish security or control. Rather, they enhanced it by reducing unrest and facilitating cooperation. Analysts debated the implications of these practices. Some argued they were a tool of soft power designed to demoralize Japanese troops psychologically, while others admitted they reflected a disciplined, industrialized approach to human management. integrated seamlessly into broader operational planning. Within Japanese command structures, these assessments sparked discussions about strategy and engagement. Orders were occasionally adapted in response to observed American behavior, and commanders grappled with the reality that prior assumptions about enemy conduct were no longer reliable. The cumulative effect of these reports extended beyond individual encounters. A consistent, humane system of prisoner treatment was reshaping perceptions at both tactical and strategic levels. The careful cataloging of procedures, from medical triage to camp organization, highlighted the broader ripple effect of American discipline, morality, and logistical sophistication. By documenting these Axis perceptions, the stage was set for examining the industrial-scale logistics and planning that allowed humane treatment to be sustained across multiple theaters of the Pacific War, proving that ethical conduct on the battlefield could be both principled and operationally effective. From 1943 onward, the effectiveness of American humane POW treatment was underpinned by an industrial and logistical apparatus as formidable as any frontline weapon. Army engineers and the Quartermaster Corps orchestrated systems capable of supplying field hospitals, detention centers, and forward medical teams with a continuous flow of rations, medical supplies, and shelter equipment sufficient for thousands of prisoners. Quonset-style huts, modular stretchers, and standardized ration packs were transported and deployed with remarkable efficiency, allowing the humane system to function across a vast expanse of Pacific islands, from the mud-choked jungles of Guadalcanal to the volcanic slopes of Bougainville. Supply chains ran like clockwork, with 10 to 15 trucks per unit delivering 1,500 to 2,000 pounds of food, medicine, and camp necessities on a daily schedule, often navigating coral roads and torrential rains with near-military precision. Operational manuals formalized these processes, detailing intake procedures for every prisoner, identity verification, medical evaluation, dietary requirements, and barracks assignment. Reports from the 25th Infantry Division emphasized the consistency of these routines, noting that even under the stress of ongoing engagements, the system remained robust and reliable. Medics and guards followed protocols strictly, ensuring that each captive, regardless of the size of the unit or remoteness of the island, received the same level of care. This standardization transformed humane treatment from a moral ideal into an operationally sustainable capability, demonstrating that ethical conduct could coexist with the demands of active combat. The impact on Japanese soldiers captured in successive campaigns was cumulative. By this stage, the cognitive dissonance first noted at Guadalcanal was reinforced and magnified. Prisoners arriving on new islands or at different facilities found identical procedures, meals, medical attention, and opportunities for correspondence. The predictability of humane treatment challenged long-held beliefs about Allied savagery, gradually reshaping attitudes towards surrender and compliance. Diaries and interrogation reports consistently remark on disbelief and cautious respect, with many soldiers noting that such treatment contrasted starkly with their indoctrinated expectations of death or torture. This orchestration of ethics through industrial logistics underscores the deliberate planning behind American POW policy. By linking battlefield procedures to supply chains, medical systems, and modular infrastructure, U.S. forces ensured that humane treatment was not a situational choice, but a strategic standard. The machinery of war in this case extended beyond guns and artillery to encompass food, medicine, and shelter, tools that both preserved lives and shaped psychological outcomes. As these systems were tested under the pressures of ongoing Pacific campaigns, the subsequent battlefield encounters would reveal not only the resilience of this approach, but also its profound influence on both American operational efficiency and Axis perceptions of their enemy. January 1944, the sun-baked coral atolls of Kwajalein, heat shimmered across the jagged limestone-strewn beaches, mixing with the acrid smell of gunpowder and the metallic tang of seawater. U.S. Marines and Army units advanced methodically under the roar of artillery, capturing over 2,000 Japanese defenders who had fought tenaciously despite dwindling rations and exhaustion. For these soldiers, trained to expect death or torture upon capture, the reality that awaited was profoundly disorienting. Within hours of surrender, wounded men received medical triage, hydration, and hot meals, delivered by teams operating under strict pre-established protocols. Field hospitals equipped with modular Quonset shelters, standardized surgical kits, and portable medical supplies conducted over 120 procedures in a single day, addressing wounds, tropical infections, and diseases such as malaria and dysentery. The efficiency and calm of these operations stood in stark contrast to the chaos of the surrounding combat, magnifying the cognitive shock experienced by the captives. Accounts from captured soldiers and war correspondents underscore this astonishment. Testimonies repeatedly described Americans treating us as if we were brothers, a sentiment that seemed almost impossible to reconcile with the bloodied and chaotic battlefield from which they had just emerged. The repeated, meticulous application of humane procedures, consistent intake assessments, secure housing, and reliable sustenance reinforced the psychological patterns first observed at Guadalcanal. Japanese soldiers, encountering the same methods on a larger scale, experienced a compounding effect. Disbelief turned into cautious respect, and some prisoners began surrendering more readily in subsequent engagements, anticipating the same treatment that had now become expected and reliable. The logistical backbone supporting these operations proved critical. From daily truck convoys delivering food, water, and medical equipment to the field hospital's ability to process hundreds of patients efficiently, the industrial and organizational innovations implemented over the preceding year ensured that humane treatment could scale to accommodate thousands of prisoners simultaneously. Officers noted that the combination of operational consistency and visible care had tangible effects on morale, not only among the POWs, but within American units themselves, who observed firsthand how disciplined, ethical conduct enhanced operational control and reduced chaos in the aftermath of engagements. Beyond the immediate battlefield, the impact rippled through Japanese intelligence and intercepted communications. Reports circulated noting the pattern of humane treatment, prompting strategic assessments and internal debate about the reliability of Allied behavior and the implications for Japanese soldiers' willingness to resist or surrender. The Battle of Kwajalein confirmed that these practices were neither accidental nor localized. They were systematically enforced, demonstrating that humane treatment could function under the harshest conditions and yield measurable operational and psychological advantages. These episodes set the stage to explore the broader consequences for morale, both among Axis troops grappling with dissonance and Allied forces recognizing the strategic power of ethical warfare. The psychological repercussions of humane POW treatment extended far beyond individual captives, shaping the behavior and perception of both Axis and Allied forces. Japanese soldiers, indoctrinated from early training to expect death upon capture, confronted an unsettling reality when met with structured care and deliberate kindness. Diaries and post-war memoirs frequently describe confusion, guilt, and in rare instances, gratitude, emotions that directly influenced behavior on the battlefield. Prisoners who might have otherwise resisted or attempted escape often complied quietly during interrogations, hesitant to provoke forces they had come to recognize as disciplined and predictable. The cognitive dissonance was profound. A soldier raised to believe that surrender was shameful now experienced survival as both possible and sanctioned, challenging deeply ingrained notions of honor and duty. For American troops, the consistent application of ethical guidelines reinforced discipline and cohesion. Units that adhered to humane standards under the stress of active combat found that maintaining order in the aftermath of engagements strengthened camaraderie and morale. Soldiers reported a sense of moral high ground, an intangible yet palpable confidence in the righteousness of their mission, which translated into steadier conduct in the field and more effective collaboration within and between units. Psychologists and military analysts of the era observed that humane treatment reduced the likelihood of prisoner uprisings and eased the logistical burden of camp management, turning what could have been a source of constant friction into a stable operational variable. The cumulative effect on Japanese captives was transformative. Soldiers began internalizing the paradox that survival could be achieved through surrender without dishonor, gradually undermining years of indoctrination. Reports from intelligence officers noted a measurable impact on battlefield dynamics. Troops increasingly chose surrender over suicidal last stands, freeing American units to concentrate on strategic objectives rather than prolonged engagements. The psychological disruption extended beyond individual behavior, creating hesitation and uncertainty within Japanese units and subtly shaping tactical outcomes across multiple theaters. Captives' recognition of consistency, fairness, and care disrupted the expected cycle of violence, demonstrating that ethical treatment could achieve practical advantages in real-time combat. By highlighting this psychological dimension, it becomes clear that humane POW management was far more than a moral imperative. It was an operational tool, systematically reinforcing discipline, streamlining resource allocation, and enhancing battlefield efficiency. The combined effect on morale, behavior, and tactical flexibility bridged directly into strategic outcomes, establishing that ethical treatment, far from being a secondary concern, could be deliberately harnessed to support operational planning, force projection, and long-term campaign success. The lessons of these psychological interactions set the stage for examining how such humane principles could influence the broader course of the Pacific campaigns, turning compassion into a strategic asset with tangible, measurable effects on warfighting. The humane treatment of Japanese POWs had a tangible impact on operational outcomes across multiple Pacific campaigns, transforming the dynamics of combat and resource allocation. Soldiers who surrendered with the expectation of care allowed American units to secure objectives more rapidly, minimizing casualties and freeing frontline forces from the necessity of prolonged mop-up operations. At Tarawa in November 1943, despite the chaos of a fiercely contested amphibious landing, captured Japanese defenders were processed efficiently, triaged and accommodated under strict POW protocols, enabling Marines to push forward into heavily fortified positions with fewer delays. The pattern repeated at Saipan in June 1944, where systematic intake procedures and forward medical support allowed thousands of surrendering soldiers to be managed without disrupting ongoing assaults, demonstrating that ethical conduct could coexist with the harsh demands of aggressive operations. Intelligence operations benefited directly from this approach. Captured soldiers provided timely and often remarkably accurate information on troop dispositions, defensive fortifications, and supply shortages. Insights that could be leveraged immediately to adjust operational plans. The reliability of this intelligence, facilitated by humane treatment and the resulting compliance of POWs, enhanced both tactical and strategic decision-making. Commanders noted that predictable and consistent procedures not only reduced the logistical burden of detention, but also amplified the combat effectiveness of their own forces, allowing units to concentrate manpower, artillery, and naval support on advancing the offensive rather than policing surrendered personnel. The psychological effects extended to Japanese command structures, which struggled to reconcile these trends with rigid Bushido doctrines. Officers faced a dual dilemma. Troops were surrendering more readily, undermining the ideal of fight-to-the-death loyalty, yet abandoning established principles risked disciplinary breakdown and the erosion of morale across other units. Intercepted communications and internal reports frequently emphasized disbelief and concern. Surrender was becoming a viable option in campaigns where it had been previously unthinkable, and the consistency of American humane treatment reinforced this behavior. The resulting tension compounded strategic inflexibility. As Japanese forces found themselves unable to adapt without violating cultural and doctrinal imperatives, through these examples, it becomes evident that ethical treatment was inseparable from military advantage. Far from a symbolic gesture, humane conduct enabled faster, more efficient operations, improved intelligence gathering, and reduced casualties, producing a cumulative operational benefit that shaped the course of multiple campaigns. At the same time, the success of these methods illuminated the limitations and adaptations required to maintain such standards under the intense pressures of continuous combat, setting the stage for examining the logistical, tactical, and moral challenges faced by American forces as they sought to uphold ethical treatment across the Pacific theater. Despite meticulous planning and robust logistical systems, The humane treatment of POWs was continually tested under the most extreme combat conditions. February 1945, Iwo Jima, a volcanic island scarred by fire, smoke, and relentless bombardment. The air was thick with ash and acrid smoke from destroyed bunkers, mixing with the metallic tang of blood and the stench of uncollected corpses. High casualties, rugged terrain, and the chaos of amphibious landings strained medical teams and supply lines, at times delaying intake procedures and limiting the comforts afforded to prisoners. Field commanders were forced to improvise, implementing triage prioritization to address the most critical injuries first, deploying mobile surgical units directly to forward positions, and establishing temporary detention zones along the beaches to stabilize captives before full processing. The environment, scorched rock, torrential rains, and pervasive disease magnified every challenge, demanding constant adaptation to maintain ethical standards under brutal conditions. Japanese prisoners, steeped in a doctrine that equated surrender with dishonor and death, sometimes viewed deviations from established procedures with suspicion. Diaries and interrogation reports recount moments of disbelief or hesitation when intake or medical care lagged due to combat exigencies, reflecting deeply ingrained cultural expectations of cruelty or retribution. Yet even amid these pressures, the systematic principles of humane treatment remained resilient. Officers and medics applied creative solutions to maintain core standards, ensuring that prisoners continued to receive food, water, medical attention, and shelter, even when conditions forced temporary adjustments. The consistent effort to uphold these protocols under extreme stress underscored the operational and moral commitment of American forces, demonstrating that humane conduct could endure even when logistics, terrain, and enemy resistance threatened to overwhelm it. The lessons of Iwo Jima highlight the delicate balance between ethical imperatives and battlefield pragmatism. Temporary deviations required rapid decision-making and flexible deployment of resources, yet they were guided by an unbroken commitment to humane treatment. These adaptations, triage prioritization, mobile hospitals, and provisional detention zones, not only preserved lives but reinforced trust and compliance among POWs, mitigating potential disorder in a chaotic theater. The experience illuminated the ways in which rigorous planning, disciplined execution, and moral resolve could coexist with the relentless pressures of frontline combat. These wartime innovations and solutions would leave a lasting legacy. The methods developed, the challenges encountered, and the adaptations implemented at Iwo Jima and similar extreme engagements informed post-war military doctrine and helped shape international standards for POW treatment. They demonstrated that ethical behavior in war was not merely aspirational. It was operationally feasible, even under the most taxing conditions, and that the principles of humanity could be codified into a system capable of functioning at scale, leaving an enduring imprint on both military practice and global expectations for the treatment of prisoners of war. After 1945, the lessons learned from humane POW treatment in the Pacific Theater were codified into enduring military doctrine and international standards. Former detention facilities and field hospitals were meticulously studied by the U.S. Army, informing the permanent integration of intake procedures, medical protocols, and ethical training into officer curricula. Manuals and training programs incorporated the meticulous recording of prisoner identity, medical triage, dietary management, and shelter logistics, ensuring that the principles proven effective in the chaos of Guadalcanal. Kwajalein, Saipan, and Iwo Jima could be replicated across future conflicts. The consistent care provided to Japanese soldiers became a case study in operational psychology, demonstrating that disciplined ethical conduct could be leveraged alongside strategic foresight to achieve tangible military advantages. Veterans of the Pacific campaigns reflected on the broader significance of these practices. Humane treatment fostered trust among prisoners, reduced long-term resentment, and shaped the perception of American forces on a global scale. Soldiers and officers alike recognized that the moral high ground was not merely symbolic. It facilitated compliance, enhanced intelligence gathering, and allowed combat units to operate more efficiently. Academics and military historians later noted these practices as early examples of psychological operations intertwined with logistical mastery, illustrating that ethical considerations could be embedded into operational planning without sacrificing effectiveness. The post-war institutionalization of humane treatment bridged battlefield experience with enduring strategic frameworks. By studying the systematic procedures implemented across thousands of POWs in the Pacific, military planners codified a model where ethical imperatives, logistical coordination, and psychological understanding worked in concert. These lessons became foundational, influencing not only U.S. military policy, but also the evolution of international conventions on the treatment of prisoners of war. The ripple effects traced back to that first shock at Guadalcanal, when Japanese soldiers confronted unexpected kindness, demonstrate the power of ethical action to shape perceptions, alter behavior, and leave a lasting imprint on both warfare and memory. In this way, the humanization of combat became inseparable from strategic advantage, closing a narrative arc that began with disbelief and ended with enduring lessons for future generations. Returning to Guadalcanal, where the earliest Japanese captives first encountered the disorienting reality of American humane treatment, the narrative comes full circle. Soldiers who had once braced for immediate execution now recalled moments of unexpected kindness, clean water offered under a sweltering sun, careful medical attention for wounds that might otherwise have proven fatal, and the calm, methodical processing of prisoners in a war-torn landscape. These seemingly small acts carried an extraordinary weight, challenging deeply ingrained cultural indoctrination and leaving impressions that endured far beyond the island's coral-strewn beaches. Diaries, interrogation reports, and post-war memoirs alike testify to the astonishment, confusion, and in some cases, quiet gratitude of men who had been conditioned to expect cruelty and death. The ripple effects of these early experiences extended throughout the Pacific theater. Japanese perceptions of the enemy shifted subtly but significantly, influencing surrender behavior in subsequent engagements and reshaping the psychological calculus of combat. Soldiers who had internalized the possibility of humane treatment were less likely to resist to the point of suicidal last stands, allowing American units to advance more efficiently while minimizing casualties. The lessons learned at Guadalcanal, when structured kindness first collided with the expectations of indoctrinated soldiers, were not lost on military planners. Post-war doctrine codified these principles, demonstrating that ethical conduct, far from being merely aspirational, could produce concrete operational, psychological, and moral advantages. By revisiting the astonished faces of Japanese POWs, the documentary emphasizes a broader reflection on the human capacity for compassion under extreme circumstances. Even amidst total war, moments of deliberate ethical choice left indelible marks, affecting morale, tactical outcomes, and the long-term reputation of forces. The deliberate integration of humane treatment into battlefield practice created a legacy that bridged immediate operational necessity and enduring strategic wisdom, proving that decisions made in moments of crisis can echo far beyond the battlefield. In this way, the story returns to its opening shock, the incredulous gaze of soldiers expecting brutality, and closes with a resonant testament to the enduring power of discipline, empathy, and moral courage in war.